Millionaire encounters homeless man with his daughter in hospital, but freezes upon recognizing who it is. Richard Thompson was running through the chilly corridors of Mercy General Hospital, desperately searching for his daughter Emily, when he suddenly stopped at the entrance to the emergency wing. His breath caught as he saw a disheveled man gently holding the hand of his 16-year-old daughter, who lay on a gurney. The stranger had unkempt grey hair, an unshaven beard, and worn-out clothes that looked like they hadn't been washed in weeks. Richard felt his blood run cold when the man looked up, and a faint smile appeared on his tired face. "Hi, Richard," said the homeless man in a hoarse but familiar voice. The businessman's legs went weak. This was Michael, his older brother, whom he had thrown out of the family 15 years ago during a terrible fight over their father's inheritance. "Emily," Richard murmured, completely ignoring Michael and rushing to his daughter. The girl slowly opened her eyes, still somewhat dazed from medication. "Dad," she whispered, and then looked at the man beside her. "Uncle Michael was here with me the whole time. He didn't leave me alone." Richard froze. Uncle Michael? How did his daughter know that name? He had never told her about his brother's existence. "Emily, how did you—" Richard began, but was interrupted by a nurse who arrived hurriedly. "Mr. Thompson, I'm glad you're here. Your daughter had a very severe allergic reaction to medication she took at school. Luckily, this gentleman," she pointed to Michael, "alerted us about her allergy. He saved the girl's life." Richard looked at his brother without understanding anything. How did Michael know about Emily's allergy to anti-inflammatories? "Doctor, you need to examine her properly," said Michael, rising from the broken plastic chair. "This allergy isn't normal. There's something more." The nurse nodded and left to call the doctor. Richard stood there motionless, looking alternately at his daughter and the brother he hadn't seen in so long. "How did you know where she was?" Richard asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "How do you know my daughter?" Michael ran his hand through his grey beard and sighed. I've been watching you from afar, Richard. Not in a strange way, but she's my niece. She's the only piece of family I have left." "You have no right," Richard said, anger beginning to take over. "Not after what you did." "Dad," Emily spoke weakly, trying to sit up on the gurney. "What are you talking about?" "Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out now continuing." "Nothing, sweetheart. This man was just—" Richard began, but Michael interrupted him. "I'm your uncle, Emily. Your father's older brother." Michael looked into the girl's eyes with a tenderness Richard hadn't seen in years. "And I just wanted to make sure you were okay." Emily looked at her father with an expression of surprise and then disappointment. "Dad, you have a brother and you never told me?" Richard felt his chest tighten. How could he explain years of hurt and resentment to a teenager? How could he tell her that he had thrown his own brother out of the house, accusing him of stealing the family business? "Emily, it's complicated," he said, avoiding his daughter's curious gaze. "No, it's not," she replied, crossing her arms. "It's simple. Either you have a brother or you don't." The doctor arrived at that moment, a middle-aged man wearing a white coat with a concerned expression. "Mr. Thompson, I'm Dr. Robert. I need to speak with you about your daughter's condition." Richard felt his stomach churn. "She's okay, isn't she?" The nurse said the allergic reaction passed. "The allergic reaction, yes, but we found something concerning in the blood tests we ran. Emily has a rare autoimmune disease. That's why the allergies are so intense." Richard's world came crashing down. "An illness? What kind of illness?" "It's treatable, but she'll need constant monitoring, and in more severe cases, a bone marrow transplant might be necessary." Emily instinctively grabbed Michael's hand as if it were a natural gesture. Richard noticed and felt a pang of jealousy mixed with confusion. "Doctor, what are her chances?" Michael asked, his voice filled with genuine concern. "It depends. If a transplant is needed, we need a compatible donor. Family members are always the first option." Richard looked at his brother and saw in his eyes the same determination he remembered from childhood, when Michael protected him from bullies at school. "I'll get tested," Michael said immediately. I'm her father's brother. No, Richard replied too quickly. You won't get involved in my daughter's life. Richard, Emily shouted, surprising everyone. How can you say that? He wants to help me. You don't understand, Emily. This man... Richard stopped, realizing he was about to say too much in front of his daughter. This man what, Dad? She insisted. Tell me right now what happened between you. Michael raised his hand. Emily, your father has reasons to be angry with me. Things happened in the past that hurt the family. What things? She asked, looking from one to the other. Richard sighed heavily. There was no escaping that conversation forever. When your grandfather, William, passed away, he left Thompson Construction for me and your uncle to run together. But... He hesitated, the painful memories returning. I found out he was embezzling money, stealing from his own family. Michael lowered his head but said nothing to defend himself. So I kicked him out of the company and the family, Richard continued, and it was the right decision. Was it? Emily asked, looking at her uncle. Uncle Michael, is that true? Michael remained silent for a long moment. When he raised his head, his eyes were moist. Your sister is here, said a female voice behind them. Richard turned and saw Sarah, his wife, running down the hallway. She stopped abruptly when she saw Michael. My God! Michael, she whispered, bringing her hand to her chest. Hello, Sarah, he replied with a sad smile. Sarah looked at Richard with an expression the businessman knew well. It was the same face she made when she knew he was wrong about something, but couldn't speak in front of other people. How are you, Emily? Sarah asked, kissing her daughter's forehead. Physically fine, but emotionally confused. I found out I have an uncle I never knew, and apparently he's a thief. Emily, Richard scolded. Leave her, Richard, Michael said calmly. She has the right to know the truth. The truth is that you almost destroyed our family, Richard retorted, his voice louder than intended. Richard, please, Sarah said softly, looking around the hospital. Not here. No, Mom. I want to know everything now, Emily said, trying to sit up better on the gurney. Uncle Michael, did you steal from the company? Michael looked directly into his niece's eyes. I signed some documents I shouldn't have signed. Documents that transferred a lot of money from the company to an account I didn't even know existed. Richard snorted. An account in your name. In my name, but one I didn't open, Michael replied calmly. But your father didn't believe me, and I couldn't prove my innocence at the time. Because there was no proof, Richard said. Only your words. Sarah coughed to get attention. Richard, I think we should talk in private. No, Emily said firmly. No more secrets in this family. I'm 16, I'm not a child anymore. Dr. Robert, who had left during the argument, returned with some papers in his hand. Sorry to interrupt, but I need information about family history for Emily's treatment. Can you help me? Of course, Richard said, trying to pull himself together. Does the family have a history of autoimmune diseases or bone marrow problems? Richard thought for a moment. Not that I know of. And you? The doctor turned to Michael. Actually, I do have some related health issues, but I've never been properly tested. What kind of issues? Excessive fatigue, joint pain, frequent infections, Michael listed. I always thought it was because of, my lifestyle. The doctor noted everything down. It would be important to run tests on you as well. If you're brothers and share a similar family history, it could help us with Emily's diagnosis. Doctor, Sarah spoke for the first time. If a transplant is needed, how long do we have to find a donor? It depends on how the disease progresses. It could be a few months, it could be a few weeks. That's why it's important to test relatives as soon as possible. Richard looked at Michael and felt a terrible conflict in his chest. On one hand, he still felt anger and distrust. On the other, it was his daughter's health at stake. Uncle, Emily called to Michael, would you get tested to help me? Of course, my dear. Anything. Richard, Sarah whispered in her husband's ear. He's willing to help our daughter. That has to count for something. Richard closed his eyes, trying to process everything that was happening. 15 years of absolute certainty about his brother's guilt began to waver. "All right," he finally said. "Get the tests done." The doctor smiled. "Great. I'll send both of you for the blood draw. The results should be ready in a few hours." While they waited for the procedures, Richard stepped aside with Sarah. "You never believed he was guilty, did you?" he asked quietly. Sarah sighed. "Richard, I tried to tell you back then. Michael was always an honest man. Remember how he took care of you when you were little? How he gave up several opportunities to help your father with the company? But the evidence? What evidence? Documents signed by him? Richard, he trusted you blindly. If you asked him to sign something, he'd sign it without even reading." Richard felt a lump in his throat. It was true. Michael had always been like that, trusting people, especially family. "Sarah, do you think that I made a mistake?" "I think you were afraid," she answered, touching her husband's arm. "Afraid of losing control of the company, afraid you wouldn't be able to manage it alone. And when an excuse appeared to get Michael out of the way, I didn't do it on purpose," Richard protested, but his voice didn't sound convincing even to himself. "Maybe not consciously," Sarah agreed. "But Richard, you were always jealous of Michael. He was the oldest son, your father's favorite." Richard felt his chest tighten. It was true. He had always felt overshadowed by his older brother, who seemed to do everything right, who was loved by everyone, who had a natural talent for leadership. "And now he's here, willing to save our daughter, even after everything you did to him." Richard looked toward where Emily was talking animatedly with Michael. The girl was laughing at something her uncle had said. "How does she know him, Sarah? How did she know his name?" Sarah hesitated. "Richard, maybe you should ask her. Do you know something I don't?" Sometimes when you traveled for work, Emily would ask me questions about her father's family, about siblings, grandparents, uncles, and you told her about Michael. I told her you had an older brother. I didn't tell her about the fight, just that you had grown apart." Richard felt betrayed for a moment, but then realized he had no right. Sarah had always been against the decision to cut Michael out of the family. Did she ask more questions? I did, and I said if she wanted to know more, she should ask you. But she never asked me. Yes, she did, Richard, several times, but you always changed the subject or said it wasn't important. Richard vaguely remembered some conversations he had avoided with his daughter. Whenever she mentioned family, relatives, he would brush it off. So she went looking on her own? Apparently, yes. At that moment, Michael approached them. "Richard, can I speak with you for a minute?" Sarah stepped away, giving space for the brothers to talk. "What do you want?" Richard asked, still on the defensive. "I want to explain to you how I met Emily." Richard crossed his arms, waiting. "About 6 months ago, I was collecting donations here in front of the hospital. It's something I do a few times a week. And I saw a girl alone at the bus stop crying." Richard felt a shiver. Emily had never told him about crying at a bus stop. She was visibly upset, so I approached to see if I could help. She said she had fought with her father and didn't want to go back home. "Fought with me? When?" She didn't give details, but it was about you not having time for her, always working, not participating in her life. Richard felt a pang of guilt. In recent months, he really had been working a lot, expanding the company to other states. I kept running into her a few times at the same stop, always after school, when she seemed like she didn't want to go straight home. "And you introduced yourself as my brother?" "No. At first I was just an older man who listened to her vent, but one day she asked me about family, if I had children, brothers, and you told her. I said I had a younger brother who was a businessman and had a beautiful daughter." Richard swallowed hard. "She got curious, asked me lots of questions. When she found out I was talking about you, she wanted to know everything." "And you told her our story?" "No. I only said we had grown apart over family problems, but that I never stopped loving you and being proud of who you became." Richard felt his eyes well up. He didn't expect to hear that. "Richard, your daughter is amazing. She's smart, sensitive, has a huge heart, and she loves you very much, even when she complains about you. So you've been meeting for months?" a few times a week. She would come here to the hospital because she knew I'd be here. We talked about school, about her dreams, about you, about me. She's worried about you, Richard. Thinks you work too much, that you're not happy. Wanted to understand why you never talked about family. Richard felt exposed, vulnerable. His own daughter had noticed things about him that he himself didn't want to admit. "Why did you never try to find me before?" Richard asked. "I tried," Michael answered simply. "In the first few years I tried several times, but you made it clear you didn't want to see me." "You tried?" "Richard, I went to your office at least 10 times. Your secretaries had orders not to let me up." Richard remembered. He had given instructions that Michael was never to be received. "I sent letters that came back unopened. I tried calling, but you changed your number. I didn't know you were still trying to contact me. I tried until about 5 years ago. Then I gave up. I thought maybe it was better to just let you live your life. But you kept living in the same city. This is my city too, Richard. I was born here, my memories are here, and even from a distance I wanted to be near you and your family." Richard felt the weight of guilt crashing down on him like an avalanche. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. "Michael, he began, but was interrupted by the arrival of the doctor. "Mr. Thompson, Mr. Michael, we need to talk about the preliminary results." The two brothers followed the doctor to a private room. Sarah and Emily stayed in the waiting room. "The tests confirmed that you are highly compatible for the transplant," Dr. Roberts said. "But there are some complications." "What kind of complications?" Richard asked. "Mr. Michael, your tests revealed that you also have serious health problems, an advanced autoimmune disease, probably caused by years of poor nutrition and exposure to adverse conditions." Richard looked at his brother with genuine concern for the first time in 15 years. "Does that mean he can't be a donor?" Richard asked. "It means it would be very risky, both for him and for Emily." "But is it possible?" Michael asked. "Technically, yes, but the chances of complications are high. It would be a high-risk surgery." "I'll do it," Michael said immediately. "No matter the risk." "Michael, no," Richard spoke. "You don't need to risk yourself for my daughter." "Our daughter," Michael corrected. "She's my niece, Richard. She's family." Richard felt something break inside him. All the anger, all the resentment he had cultivated for years began to crumble. "Doctor, are there other options?" Richard asked. "We can look on the national donor list, but it could take months, and given Emily's current condition, we don't have that much time." "How much time do we have?" Michael asked. "A few weeks, maybe a month if she responds well to the initial treatment." The two brothers fell silent, processing the information. "I want to talk with my family," Richard said finally. "We need to decide together." When they returned to the waiting room, Emily and Sarah were talking quietly. Both looked at them anxiously. "So?" Emily asked. Richard told them about the compatibility and the risks. Emily turned pale. "Uncle Michael, you can't risk yourself for me," she said. "Emily, I've lived my life and it wasn't a very good one. If I can do something to give you a chance to live your life fully, I will do it." "No," she shook her head. "There has to be another way." Sarah hugged her daughter. "We'll have to think calmly. We don't need to decide right now." "Actually, we do," the doctor said, returning with more test results. "Emily's condition is deteriorating faster than we expected. We need to make a decision within 48 hours. Richard felt the world spin. 48 hours to decide whether to let his brother risk himself to save his daughter. "Doctor, aren't there alternative treatments?" Sarah asked. "There are, but they are palliative. They might give a few months, maybe a year more, but they are not curative." Emily held her father's and uncle's hands. "I want you to resolve this together, as brothers. Whatever decision you make, I will accept it." That night, Richard could barely sleep. Sarah was beside him, equally restless. "Richard, you need to talk properly with your brother," she said in the darkness of the bedroom. "I know, but Sarah, what if I was wrong all this time? What if you were? How will I live with that? How will I look him in the face knowing I destroyed 15 years of his life over something he might not have even done? Richard, You can't change the past, but you can change the future. What if something happens to him during the surgery? If he risks himself for Emily and doesn't survive, how will I live with that too? Sarah turned to him. What if you don't let him try and our daughter... She couldn't finish the sentence. Richard closed his eyes, feeling the impossible weight of the decision. The next day, Richard went to look for Michael. He discovered his brother was living in a small studio apartment in a working-class neighborhood, in very simple but dignified conditions. Michael opened the door, surprised. "Richard, how did you find out where I live?" "I asked a few people. May I come in?" The apartment was small but clean and organized. There were some books stacked, clothes folded carefully, and a small photo of the Thompson family from their childhood days. "You kept that photo," Richard observed. "I kept many things," Michael answered. "Would you like some coffee?" Richard nodded and sat in one of the two chairs at the small table. "Michael, I need to ask you a question, and I need you to be completely honest with me. I've always been honest with you. That money that went missing from the company, you really didn't know anything about it." Michael poured the coffee and sat across from his brother. "Richard, I swear by our father's memory that I never stole a single cent from the company, not from the family either." "Then how do you explain the documents signed by you?" "Do you remember Daniel, who was the accountant at the time?" Richard remembered. Daniel had worked with them for years. He brought me the papers saying they were routine authorizations for transfers between company accounts. I trusted him. And I trusted you. "Me?" "Richard, you were the one handling the financial side. If Daniel said you had asked me to sign, I signed. I never questioned it." Richard felt his stomach turn. "Daniel said I had asked." "He did. Said you were very busy with the new contracts and had asked him to expedite the paperwork." Richard remembered that time. He was indeed very busy with the company's expansion. "And you never suspected anything?" "Why would I suspect? You were my family, the only family I had." Richard put his head in his hands. "Michael, do you remember where Daniel is today?" "I don't know. After you kicked me out, I lost touch with everyone from the company." Richard thought quickly. 15 years ago, right after the money was discovered missing, Daniel had resigned, claiming he wanted to start his own business. At the time, Richard thought it was normal. "Michael, I need to tell you something." "What?" "A week after I kicked you out of the company, Daniel resigned, said he had won the lottery and was going to open his own accounting firm." Michael slowly lifted his head. "Won the lottery." "That's what he said. At the time, I didn't question it because I was focused on reorganizing everything after you left." "Richard, do you believe in coincidences?" Richard felt a terrible sensation spreading through his chest. "Where can I find the documents from that time?" "I have copies of some. I kept everything for years, trying to understand what had happened." Michael went to a small file cabinet and brought out a yellowed folder. "Look at this," he said, showing a series of documents. "All the transfers were made to the same account, an account that was supposedly mine, but that I never opened." Richard examined the papers. There were details he hadn't paid attention to 15 years ago, blinded by anger and the certainty of his brother's guilt. Michael, who witnessed the opening of this account? According to these documents, Daniel. Richard felt the world spinning. How had he been so blind? How had he not investigated properly? "Richard, I tried to show you this back then. I tried to explain that I knew nothing about this account. But you had documents with your signature. Documents that Daniel brought me to sign, saying you had asked." Richard stood up from the chair, starting to pace around the small apartment. "Michael, if what you're saying is true, it is true. Then I destroyed your life for nothing." "Richard, 15 years, Michael. 15 years you've lived alone, struggling, being treated as a thief by your own family, and you were innocent." Richard stopped in front of the window, looking out at the busy street. "How can you be here, willing to save my daughter, after everything I did to you?" Michael approached his brother. "Because she is my niece. And because, despite everything, you're still my younger brother." Richard turned to him, eyes filled with tears. Michael, I'm so sorry. I'm truly sorry. I know. How can you forgive me just like that? Richard, I forgave you a long time ago. What hurt me wasn't the accusation. It was having lost my brother. Richard embraced Michael for the first time in 15 years. The two men cried there in the small apartment, trying to rebuild years of hurt with a simple hug. What do we do now? Richard asked when they separated. Now we take care of Emily, Michael answered. And then we take care of the rest. Michael, about the surgery. I'm going to do it, Richard, with or without your permission. That's not it. It's that I can't let you risk yourself alone. I'll do everything to find other options first. Richard, we don't have time. We have 48 hours. I'll use every minute. Richard spent the rest of the day on the phone calling renowned doctors, researching alternative treatments, looking for compatible donors in other countries. Sarah helped with the research while Emily rested at the hospital. Michael stayed by his niece's side the entire time. Uncle, Emily said that afternoon, can I ask you a question? Of course. Do you regret anything in your life? Michael thought for a moment. I regret not fighting more to prove my innocence back then. I regret giving up on the family so easily. But you tried, right? Tried to reconcile with my dad? I tried, yes. Then it's not your fault. The fault is his for not wanting to listen. Emily, your father was protecting the family. In his mind, I was a threat. But you were never a threat. No, but he didn't know that. Emily became thoughtful. Uncle, are you afraid of the surgery? I am, but I'm more afraid of something happening to you. What if you don't survive? Then at least I'll have done something important in my life. Your life is already important, Emily said, holding her uncle's hand. You're important to me. Michael smiled, feeling an emotion he hadn't experienced in years. Emily, can I tell you a secret? You can. Meeting you was the best thing that happened to me in the last 15 years. Even though I'm the daughter of the brother who kicked you out of the house, especially because of that, you made me remember that there's still love in this family. That night, Richard returned to the hospital with news. I found 3 possible compatible donors, he said to the gathered family. Where? Sarah asked. 1 in Chicago, 1 in Miami, and 1 in Canada. What's their availability? Michael wanted to know. That's the problem. The one in Chicago has surgery scheduled for next week. The one in Miami has health problems, and the one in Canada would be very complicated logistically. So we're back to the original option, Emily said. Emily, we still have a few hours, Richard insisted. I might be able to speed up the process with the Chicago donor. Dad, stop. You're killing yourself trying to keep Uncle Michael from having the surgery. Why? Richard hesitated. Because I can't lose him again. But you had already lost him 15 years ago. It's different now. Why? Richard looked at his brother. Because now I know he never deserved to be lost. Michael approached Richard. Richard, you're not going to lose me. I'll come through this surgery fine, and we'll have many years to make up for lost time. You can't guarantee that. You're right, I can't. But I can guarantee that if I don't try and something happens to Emily, neither of us will ever forgive ourselves. Richard knew his brother was right. All right, he said finally, but on one condition. What? After the surgery, you come live with us. I want my brother back in my life. Michael smiled. I accept. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing, the surgery was scheduled for the next day. The night before, the family spent the entire night at the hospital. Richard took a moment alone with Michael. Brother, there's one more thing I need to tell you. What? I found Daniel. Michael straightened up in his chair. Found him? Where? He has a very prosperous accounting firm in Washington, D.C. $500,000 house, fancy car, rich lifestyle. And you talked to him? I did. On the phone. When I mentioned your name and the events from 15 years ago, he got nervous. Very nervous. What did he say? First, he tried to deny remembering anything. Then, when I insisted, he hung up. Richard. Michael, I'm going to Washington, D.C. after your surgery. I'm going to confront him properly and get a confession. Richard, that won't change anything. Yes, it will. It will clear your name. It will prove to everyone that you were always innocent. Richard, I don't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. I just need you to believe me. I do believe you, but I want everyone to know the truth. Michael put his hand on his brother's shoulder. You know I never wanted the company's money, right? I know. What I always wanted was to work by your side, build something together, continue what our father started. Richard felt his chest tighten. Michael, when you recover from the surgery, do you want to come back to the company? You would offer me that. Not only would I offer it, I want you to be my partner again, 50-50 like Dad wanted. Michael was moved. Richard, I would accept, but on one condition. What? I want the company to have a social project, something to help people who went through what I went through. Homeless people? People who lost everything and need a second chance. Richard smiled. Deal. On the day of the surgery, the whole family was present. Sarah had brought her sister, Richard's parents, some close friends. Before going into the operating room, Michael asked to speak with each one individually. With Sarah. Sarah, thank you for always believing in me, and thank you for raising such a special daughter. Michael, you're going to come through this just fine, and we're going to be a family again. Yes, we are. With his parents. Dad, Mom, I'm sorry for all these years of suffering I caused the family. Son, his mother, Mrs. Margaret, 72 years old, said with tears in her eyes, you never caused suffering. We're the ones who failed to defend you. It was my fault, Mr. George, 75 years old, added. I should have investigated better before taking sides. It doesn't matter anymore, Michael hugged them. The important thing is that we're together now, with Emily. My beautiful niece, you changed my life. You changed mine too, Uncle. You taught me that family is much more important than money or pride. Take care of your dad for me, okay? He's more sensitive than he looks. I will. But you'll be there to help. Yes, I will. Finally, with Richard. Bro, Michael used the childhood nickname. If anything goes wrong, it won't. But if it does, I want you to know that I have completely forgiven you and that I love you. Richard hugged his brother tightly. I love you too. And when you come out of this surgery, we'll have the rest of our lives to be brothers again. The surgery lasted 6 hours. 6 agonizing hours of waiting for the whole family. Sarah paced the hallway. Richard sat down, stood up, sat down again. Emily tried to read a book but couldn't concentrate. Finally, Dr. Robert appeared, still in his surgical scrubs. Thompson family. Everyone stood up at the same time. How are they? Richard asked. The surgery was a success. Both Emily and Michael are stable. A collective sigh of relief echoed through the hallway. Are they awake? Sarah asked. Not yet. They should wake up in the next few hours. But both their vital signs are good. Doctor, Richard Thompson asked, what's the recovery outlook? Emily should recover completely in a few weeks. Michael will need more time, perhaps several months, but the prospects are very good. 2 hours later, Emily was the first to wake up. Dad? She called weakly. I'm here, sweetheart. Richard held her hand. And Uncle Michael? He's fine, still sleeping, but he's fine. He saved my life. He certainly did. Dad, promise me something? Anything. Promise you'll never let pride get in the way of our family again? Richard kissed his daughter's forehead. I promise. Michael woke up late in the afternoon. The first thing he did was ask about Emily. She's doing great, Richard said, holding his brother's hand. You did it. You saved my daughter. Our daughter, Michael corrected with a weak smile. Our daughter. In the days that followed, as the two recovered, Richard made a decision. He traveled to Washington, D.C. to confront Daniel. The meeting was tense. When Richard appeared in Daniel's office, the man became visibly nervous. "Richard, what are you doing here?" "I came for the truth, Daniel." "What truth?" "The truth about the money that disappeared from the company 15 years ago." Daniel tried to maintain his composure, but Richard noticed his hands trembling. "Richard, I don't know what you're talking about." "I know you do. And I know it was you who stole the money, not my brother." "That's crazy. Michael signed all the documents." "Documents you told him I had asked him to sign." Daniel turned pale. "Daniel, my brother almost lost his life saving my daughter. After 15 years of being treated like a thief for something you did. Richard, You what? Are you going to keep lying?" Daniel sank heavily into his chair. "Richard, I was in a lot of debt back then. I had gotten involved with gambling. I owed money to loan sharks. So you stole from the company and let my brother take the blame. I didn't plan it. When you discovered the missing funds, I didn't have the courage to confess. And you let a family fall apart. I'm sorry, Richard. I truly am sorry. Being sorry doesn't give my brother back 15 years of his life." Daniel stood up. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to confess officially. I want you to clear Michael's name. And if I don't, then I'll go to the press, I'll go to your company's clients, I'll tell your story to everyone who knows you." Daniel knew he had no choice. "All right, I confess." Richard recorded the full confession. Daniel admitted to forging documents, lying about Richard's authorizations, and transferring the money to a fake account in Michael's name. When Richard returned home, he found Michael already there, recovering well. "How are you feeling?" Richard asked. "Better every day. And you, how did it go in Washington, D.C.? Richard told him everything. He showed him the recording of the confession. "Now everyone will know you were always innocent." Michael listened calmly. "Richard, thank you for doing this, but you know something." "What?" "It doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that you believe me, and that we're a family again." Richard smiled. "Michael, there's one more thing. I spoke with our lawyers. All the money that was taken, with adjustments and interest, will be returned to you." "Richard, I don't want that money." "Why not?" "Because I want it to be used for the company's social project, to help other people." Richard hugged his brother. "You haven't changed a bit, have you? Still the same generous person you always were. And you, have you changed? I hope so. I hope I've learned that family is more important than anything." Emily, who had been listening to the conversation from the doorway, entered the room. "Dad, can I say something?" "Of course. I'm proud of both of you, of Uncle Michael for saving me, and of you for having the humility to recognize your mistake and fight to make it right." "Emily," Michael said, "you're the one who saved us." "What do you mean?" "You brought me back to the family. You made your father realize that pride isn't worth more than love. And you," Richard completed, "taught me that forgiveness is possible, that it's never too late to start over." Sarah entered the room at that moment. "The whole family together? What important conversation is this?" "We were talking about new beginnings," Richard said. "Then it's the perfect time to share the news," Sarah smiled. "What news?" Emily asked. "The doctor called. Emily's follow-up test showed that the transplant was a complete success. There are no more signs of the disease." "Really?" Emily shouted. "Really? You're cured?" The family hugged, crying with joy. "And there's more," Sarah continued. "Richard, tell them about the company." "Oh yes," Richard perked up. "Michael, do you accept being my official partner again? I signed the papers today. 50% each." "Richard, are you sure?" "I am. And I already have the first project for our social program." "What is it?" "A free clinic for homeless people, with doctors, social workers, and job opportunities." Michael was moved. "Richard, that's perfect. And do you know where it's going to be?" "Where?" "On the lot next to Mercy General Hospital, the place where you met Emily." Emily clapped her hands. "That's amazing." "And there's a name for the clinic," Richard continued. "The Margaret and George Thompson Health Center." "Grandma and Grandpa's names?" Emily asked. "That's right. in honor of our parents who always taught us about family and forgiveness, even when we forgot the lessons. Michael hugged his brother. Richard, I can't believe all this is happening. Yes, you can. Because we deserve to be happy. And most of all, we deserve to be a family. A few months later, the clinic was inaugurated. The ceremony was attended by the entire Thompson family, local authorities, and hundreds of people who would benefit from the project. Michael, fully recovered, gave an emotional speech. This clinic is not just a place for medical treatment, it's a symbol that all people deserve a second chance. I had my second chance, thanks to the love of my family. Now we want to give that same opportunity to others. Richard also spoke. My brother taught me that forgiveness is the greatest proof of love, and that family is the most precious thing we have. This clinic is our way of multiplying that love. Emily, now completely healthy and full of energy, insisted on speaking as well. A few months ago, I thought family was just me, my dad, and my mom. I discovered that family is much bigger than that. Family is all the people who love us and are willing to sacrifice for each other. Sarah, proud, watched the rebuilt family. Mrs. Margaret and Mr. George, now 73 and 76 years old respectively, were in the front row, beaming to see their children united again. Our father always said that family is like a tree, Mr. George told the audience. Even when a branch breaks, the tree remains strong. And when the branch is cared for with love, it grows back even stronger. The clinic began operating immediately, serving an average of 200 people per week. Michael insisted on working directly with patients, using his personal experience to help them. Richard discovered a satisfaction in social work that he had never experienced just making money. Emily, inspired by the family's experience, decided to study medicine with a focus on helping underprivileged communities. 1 year after the clinic's inauguration, the family received unexpected news. Sarah rushed into the house holding an envelope. Richard, Michael, you need to see this. What is it? Richard asked. A letter arrived from the State Department of Health. About what? Sarah opened the letter and read aloud. Dear Mr. Richard and Michael Thompson, it is with great pleasure that we inform you that the Margaret and George Thompson Health Center has been selected as the state model for social responsibility. The project will be replicated in 5 other cities across the state. Really? Michael asked in disbelief. There's more, Sarah continued. Additionally, funds have been allocated in the amount of $2 million for the expansion of the project. The family hugged each other in celebration. Michael, Richard said, do you realize what this means? That we'll be able to help many more people. Exactly. And it all started because you had the courage to forgive and sacrifice yourself for Emily. Actually, Emily interrupted, it all started because I wanted to meet my whole family. And I, Sarah added, because I never stopped believing that you two would love each other again. That night, during the family dinner, Richard made a toast. I want to toast to Michael, who taught me that it's possible to start over, to Sarah, who never gave up on our family, to Emily, who showed us that love is stronger than pride, and to our parents, who gave us the foundation of values that, even forgotten for a while, returned when we needed it most. And I, Michael said, raising his glass, want to toast to the 15 years we lost, because they made us value even more the years we have ahead of us. I, Emily said, want to toast to my illness because without it, you would never have reconciled. And I, Sarah concluded, want to toast to love, which always wins in the end. 2 years later, Richard was in his office when he received an unexpected call. Mr. Richard, this is Dr. Robert from Mercy General Hospital. Richard felt his heart race. Any medical call still made him nervous. Doctor, is everything all right? Everything's great. Actually, I'm calling with good news. Do you remember the bone marrow donation program you created at the clinic? Yes. We've already found 3 perfect matches for patients who had been on the waiting list for years. Richard smiled. That's wonderful, Doctor. And there's more. One of the donors is a young man who was homeless and now works at your clinic. He's going to save the life of an 8-year-old child. Richard felt his eyes well up. Doctor, that's incredible. Mr. Richard, your project is saving lives in ways you can't even imagine. When Richard shared the news with the family, everyone was moved. "Dad," Emily said, "do you realize that now we're the ones saving other families?" "How so?" "The clinic is bringing families together, giving second chances, healing people. It's like we're multiplying the miracle that happened to us." Michael put his hand on his niece's shoulder. "Emily, you're still too wise for your age." "I learned from the wisest uncle in the world, and from the most stubborn father in the world," Richard laughed, "but who finally learned to listen." Sarah watched the family with a smile on her face. "You know something?" she said. "I always knew you would reconcile." "How did you know?" Richard asked. "Because true love between brothers is indestructible. It may be hidden, hurt, but it never disappears." "Mom," Emily said, "can I ask you a question?" "Of course." "Do you regret anything in this whole story?" Sarah thought for a moment. "I regret not insisting more that you talk earlier, that I let 15 years go by." "But maybe," Michael said, "everything had to happen exactly this way, so that we could learn the real value of family." "You think so?" Richard asked. "I do. If none of this had happened, perhaps you would never have stopped to reflect on what truly matters in life." "And I never would have met my uncle," Emily added. "And the health center would never have existed," Sarah added. Richard reflected on that. "You might be right. Perhaps all the suffering served a greater purpose." "Dad," Emily said, "can I tell you a secret?" "Go ahead." "During the time I was sick, when I saw the two of you fighting and then making up, I thought of something." "What did you think?" "That if my illness could bring our family together, I would get sick again if I had to." Richard hugged his daughter. "Don't say that, sweetheart. You will never have to go through anything like that again. We are a family now. Forever." "Forever," Michael repeated. "Forever," Sarah confirmed. "Forever." Emily sealed the promise. And so, what began as a tragedy turned into the greatest blessing for the Thompson family. Emily's illness, which could have destroyed everything, ended up being the catalyst for healing much deeper wounds. Richard learned that pride is worth less than love. Michael discovered that forgiveness is liberation. Sarah saw her family rebuilt, and Emily gained not only her health, but a complete and united family. The health center continued to grow, the company thrived with a social focus, and the Thompson siblings became an example of how forgiveness can transform lives. Today, 5 years later, when Richard looks back, he knows that that day at the hospital was the day his life truly began, the day he found not only a brother but himself. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this story of family reconciliation and forgiveness. Have you ever experienced a similar situation with family conflicts that were resolved through love? Share your honest impressions and experiences. Do you think Richard made the right decision by asking his brother for forgiveness? Did you like the way Emily brought the family back together? We would love to read your opinion and your own stories. Thank you so much for joining us.